How do you learn to speak English? In this video, we'll discuss 3 methods for learning to speak English that really work. But before we do, we first need to talk about how humans learn. This is important because if you have some basic understanding of how we learn, you'll be able to distinguish good learning methods from bad ones. So let's begin. The first thing you need to know is that there are 2 types of learning. The first type of learning is called explicit learning or conscious learning. This is the type of learning where the learner knows that he's learning something and also what is being learned. One example of explicit learning is studying grammar. When you listen to an English teacher explaining the past tense, you're learning English explicitly by consciously memorizing how to use the past tense. The second type of learning is called implicit learning or unconscious learning. In implicit learning, the learner doesn't know what is being learned. Oftentimes, he's not even aware that he's learning something. The learning happens unconsciously. One example of implicit learning is listening to a conversation in English. When you listen to a conversation, your main goal is not to learn English, but to understand the conversation. But by doing the activity, you're simultaneously learning English. You may not realize it, but you're learning many aspects of the English language, the sentence structure, the grammar, the vocabulary, and so on. So we can learn English in 2 different ways, either explicitly or implicitly. The question is, which way of learning is better? To answer this question, consider this. Just like there are 2 types of learning, there are also 2 types of knowledge, explicit knowledge and implicit knowledge. Explicit learning results in explicit knowledge, whereas implicit learning results in implicit knowledge. And there's a very big difference between these 2 knowledges. Accessing explicit knowledge requires conscious thought. You have to think about the knowledge in order to use it. This means that if you want to speak English properly, you have to think about English. You have to think about whether to use the past tense or something else. You have to think about how to form a sentence properly. But that's impossible because when you speak, there's no time to think about any of that. In contrast, accessing implicit knowledge doesn't require conscious thought. You don't have to think about the knowledge in order to use it. Think about how you speak your first language. It's pretty effortless, isn't it? You can speak properly without having to think about any grammar rule. That is possible only because your knowledge of your native language is implicit. For this reason, implicit learning is a much better learning strategy. When you don't have to think about English, it frees up your mind so you can fully concentrate on expressing your thoughts and ideas. Unfortunately, many English students like to learn English in an explicit manner. Some of them spend time on YouTube watching videos about grammar. What they don't realize is that the knowledge they gain from the activity is explicit knowledge, which is almost useless when it comes to speaking. So let me share with you 3 methods for learning to speak English that really work. I'll give you an overview of them as well as their advantages and disadvantages. And at the end of this video, there'll be a link to a free resource where you can study each of these methods in detail. The first method is listening. Just listen to English as much as possible. An advantage of this method is that it's easy to do. You can do it while stuck in traffic, while exercising, while waiting in line, and so on. But the main drawback of this method is that it's too passive. Listening alone is not enough. You have to combine listening with some sort of speaking practice. And that brings us to the next method, which is to use English speaking courses that teach English implicitly. Let's see how these courses work. Is there a cat?
No, there is not cat.
No, there isn't a cat. What is there?
There is a dog.
A dog. There's a dog. Does Lisa own the dog?
No, Lisa doesn't own the dog.
No, she doesn't. Lisa doesn't own the dog. Who owns the dog then? Okay, so that's one example. Here's another one. There was a guy named John. He wanted to own a restaurant. Did John want to own a car?
No, he didn't want to own a car.
No, he didn't want to own a car. What did he want?
He wanted to own a restaurant.
Well, he wanted to own a restaurant.
He wanted to own a restaurant.
Who wanted to own a restaurant? Okay, so that's how it works. A key advantage of using a course like this is that you get feedback every time you speak. This allows you to learn and improve quickly. This is great for beginners. By using a course like this, the learner can expect to see significant improvements in a matter of months. But this method has some disadvantages too, one of which is limited learning. When you use a course like this, you get to learn only the words, phrases, and other things that are used in that course. And this is a problem because in order to speak English well, you need to keep expanding your vocabulary. Another problem is that at some point, it's going to become easy for you to practice with these courses, and you will stop improving. When that happens, you're going to need to use a different method in order to keep getting better. And that brings us to the last method, which is called imitation. This is a practice where you listen to a conversation or a story in English and then try to tell that story in your own words. And by doing so, you get to learn grammar, vocabulary, and other aspects of English. This is a great method for intermediate and advanced speakers. A key advantage of this method is that there are virtually no limits to how much you can learn. The more you practice, the more you learn, and the larger your vocabulary. But the main problem with this method is that it can be difficult for beginners. If right now you can speak English just a little bit, you may not be able to practice imitation effectively. If that's the case, you might want to start with 1 or 2 speaking courses before you start using this method. Okay, so that's an overview of 3 learning methods that work because they're all a form of implicit learning. If you want to learn more about these methods, check out this resource where you can find a tutorial on imitation, a list of recommended speaking courses, and a video series on how to practice listening the right way. Just click here to go to that resource.